Hey South Hills, today I have Miss Gretchen Smith with us today. And she is the wife of our campus pastor in Corona, Adam Smith, but more importantly, she's one of our staff members and our champion for foster care awareness. May is Foster Care Awareness Month, and as a church, we want to use this opportunity to raise awareness about the importance of foster care and the impact it can have on children's lives. We're also excited to be partnering with an organization called Olive Crest for the second year in a row. Olive Crest is dedicated to preventing child abuse by strengthening, equipping, and restoring children and families in crisis, one life at a time.
Did you know that as of 2020, there were approximately 33,000 children in foster care in Southern California and over 3,000 children waiting for adoption? In fact, Los Angeles County has the largest foster care population in the United States. We have a serious need right here in our own backyard, and it's important that we educate ourselves.
Psalms 82:3 tells us, defend the defenseless, the fatherless and the forgotten, the disenfranchised and the destitute. And another version says, you are here to defend the defenseless, to make sure that the underdogs get a fair break. Your job is to stand up for the powerless and prosecute all those who exploit them.
Every child deserves a safe and loving home, but unfortunately not all children have that opportunity. Whether from neglect, parental abuse of substances, or other various reasons, some children can't stay with their biological families, and that's where foster care comes in. Foster care provides a temporary home for children until they can be reunited with their families or placed in a permanent home. Foster care provides an opportunity for children to have stability, support, and love during a difficult time in their lives. It gives them a chance to have a childhood they might have otherwise missed out on.
As a church, we are called to show up for these children. Whether you feel called to be the one fostering or adopting, or you want to support foster care families and the children in their care, there are so many places to start. This month, we'll be providing opportunities to volunteer, donate, or advocate. If you want to know more, make sure to stop by the Connect area at your campus or shoot us a message.
I'm so excited to learn more and grow together.
Church, we just want to make a difference in people's lives, and I know you want to as well.
We all have hard things to do, but cave quicker than we'd like. We all have our breaking point. Jesus overcame enormous opposition. What can he teach us about how to do the same? The rules of resilience.
Speaking of parenting, how many parents in the house? Everybody? Oh, that's most of us. All right, good. Okay, so parenting's pretty amazing, right? Like my son Kai, he just had his 13th birthday a couple days ago. So that's our third teenager that has come through our house. I can't say we have 3 teenagers now because my older 2 are in their 20s. But 10 years ago, coming up just a few months, 10 years ago, we traveled to China and met him and adopted him, came home with just this incredible 3-year-old little boy. And when he was 5 years old, his little brother Kelton came home, and we adopted Kelton, we started fostering him when he was 6 months old. So he came home as a baby when Kai was 5 years old. And they have been really attached at the hip ever since, and they are best buds. They do everything together. They love each other to death. But when Kelton was a baby, Kai was 5. We were driving in the car, and Kelton, was starting to talk, and he was just jabbering, and he, once he started talking, he has not shut up in the 5 years since he started talking. But he's very verbal, and so he was just saying all the gibberish stuff that babies say, and Kai was playing with him, and we were like, "Hey, Kai, like, what's he saying?" And so Kai leans over and he's listening to him, and he's 100% serious. He's trying to figure it out. He's listening. And then he sits up and he goes, "I don't know. He's speaking Spanish." And we were just like, yes, he is. Yes, he is. But parenting's great, but it's not always giggles and cute stories like that, right? Like have you ever asked a toddler or a preschooler to do something really simple, like move their shoes or grab your blanket or put that toy away? And you have that, they have that moment, and it can be a tad bit dramatic, right? And sure, there's moments where by some miracle of God, they just do it, and they do it with a good attitude. But then there are plenty of moments where they're they're absolutely defiant and they just pretend like they don't hear you, you know. But then there's other times where they just have a complete meltdown. I can't do it. You know, just like you just got to grab the blanket. All you got to do is pull the blanket. I can't do it. I can't. They just fall on the ground. You know what I'm talking about? So when my daughter Kaylee, she's 20 now, but when she was a toddler, we transitioned her to a toddler bed, and we, from the time that our kids, you know, went to their toddler bed, we were teaching them to make their bed, which was really just like, you have a blanket on it, all you got to do is pull it up. Like that's all, you know, there's not a lot to it. And we're trying to get her to do it, and every day, man, it was just a fight. I can't do it. Just laying on the ground. My oldest son, Jaron, he would have meltdowns anytime he came to the table to eat and there was meat on his plate, because he would just chew it. And I don't know if he was afraid to swallow or if he just felt like he would just chew on one piece of meat for like 30 minutes. And so he started to develop this phobia of meat, and he would just melt down like, I know. And I'm like, dude, I know chewing is hard. I can't believe I just said that. I know chewing is hard. But you gotta chew it and you gotta swallow, right? But if it's not your kid, like those moments can be kind of entertaining, right? But if it is your kid, it's not so fun. And honestly, let's be real for a minute. It's not just kids that have meltdowns, right? Like hopefully it looks a little bit different, but growing up doesn't always mean that you grow out of those things. Have you ever had your day ruined because they got your coffee order wrong at your favorite coffee shop? Or have you ever been in a hurry and you're stressed out and you decided today's the day that, because you never eat fast food because you're a good person, but today's the day that you're going to go through fast food, and you get fast food and you're very particular and you don't hold the mayo and just, you know, you give them and you pull away and it's all screwed up and you're just like, right? Start throwing French fries around. See, we actually, in our culture, we have a whole language, a whole culture sort of around complaining about how hard adulting is because of really terrifying things like laundry, right? Like people quit their jobs because they were expected to actually show up and, I don't know, do work. There's memes that we have that tell about all the ways that people literally can't even. You ever heard somebody say that? I can't even. They did the thing, I just can't even today. Right? And we can probably all think of a million examples of things that other people can't seem to handle that you think are ridiculous. But that's just because it's not your thing, right? Because if we're honest, we all have our things that we don't want to talk about, conversations that are off limits for us, stuff that we don't want to have to face, opinions you don't want to have to listen to or hear or read about, things you don't want to be challenged to do. We all have those things. We all have our kryptonite, right? That thing that just is like we melt in the face of. And a lot of those things are just daily things. And that says nothing of the state of the world around us, right? With all the violence and the inhumanity and the instability, and it just feels like things are growing more and more unstable by the day. And then there's all the truly exhausting, truly gut-wrenching and heartbreaking, even devastating moments that life throws at all of us. And one of the surprising things about human beings is just how strong we can be. Just as surprising is how all of that strength can evaporate in just a moment. We are at the same time unexplainably tough and unpredictably fragile. See, I'm convinced that resilience might be the singular characteristic that defines the difference between those who thrive and overcome and those who quit and are overwhelmed. And I think that's true whether you're talking about the challenges that life throws at you. It's also true of the challenges that you throw yourself into to try to strive and to grow and to change and to make a difference and to become better in your life. How is it that some people fail over and over and over again, but just never give up, never quit? They just keep getting up and keep going. But then other people have one or two failures, one or two setbacks, and they can't seem to bounce back, and they're just never the same from that thing. I mean, what is resilience? And so I thought if we're going to talk about it all month, we probably need to be on the same page about what we're actually talking about. So there's a couple of different definitions of resilience, but I wrestled with it all week, and they just felt incomplete to me. And so I came up with my own. Far be it from me to argue with the people who write the dictionary and define words, but I decided to write my own definition of the word resilience for this morning. So resilience is the combination of durability, right? That ability to withstand and recover from things, along with flexibility, the capacity to be stretched and challenged, to bounce back, and also adaptability, the willingness to evolve and adjust so that you can move forward. Have you ever felt like you make really big decisions for your life and they last for about 5 minutes? Right? You're like, I am never going to do that again until later today. Sometimes I feel like one of the only things that I might be an expert on is quitting and failure and heartbreak. Some of you guys know the period of time starting in 2016, really there was a period of about 3.5 years that was just brutal for me personally, brutal for our family. It included like some personal tragedy, some really terrible things that happened to our family. It included some stuff that I was going through as a pastor and with one of the churches that I was leading. It included all kinds of stuff. It included setbacks and failures and stuff. And in the middle of 2019, I found myself, I didn't know it at the time, but I found myself depressed. And my marriage was great, my kids were great, and I was doing the thing that I love to do. I feel like that I was born to do, and yet I just had zero motivation. I'd wake up every day and I'd get dressed to go to work, and I just didn't want to. I just wanted to be at home. I just wanted to sit around and zone out and watch Netflix and eat stuff. And so I decided to go to a counselor, and I was talking to him, describing it. And my wife has, and many of you know, my wife struggled with anxiety and depression her whole life. And so in my mind, I wasn't depressed because what I had didn't look anything like what she's ever been through. And so I sat down, I'm telling him about it, and he's like, oh yeah, you're depressed. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know if you know me, but I don't get depressed. That's not something I deal with. And he's like, look, have you ever had a rubber band? And it's like when rubber bands are new and fresh, you can pull them and twist them and jerk them around. You can do it. And he's like, and they snap back. He's like, human beings are like that. He's like, you've been through a lot, but the problem is as we get older, it's like you get an older rubber band, it starts to dry out. And if you pull it too hard, it gets stretched out and it doesn't snap back. He's like, that's what's happened to you. Life has pulled you and stretched you in ways that you were not prepared for, and you're not young anymore. And I was like, you can shut up, counselor. He's like, so you're just stretched out. He's like, the good news is we can get you back into that shape. I was like, are we talking about working out? Because that's not why I came to see you. I don't really want to do that. See, that's what makes resilience so interesting and so powerful, right? Is that you have the capacity to bounce back, to return to the original form that you were in before all of the tragedy and the twisting and pulling and stretching happened. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but do you ever get sucked into like a YouTube vortex, like black hole, where you're like watching stuff and you find yourself, you end up, and you don't really realize it till you're like watching a video that you would never like search for to watch, but you're just like, why am I watching this video? And so that happened to me, only it happened with a video about camels. And so I learned some really interesting things about camels. Camels can go weeks and weeks and weeks without water. And camels can walk 1,000 miles. And they can walk 1,000 miles with seemingly endless endurance. And one of the things that sets them apart from other sort of pack animals is like, because animals like horses, that you can tell when they're getting tired. You can tell when they're wearing out. You can tell when they're about to break down. But with camels, you can't. They will give you no indication that they're about to collapse. They will walk and walk and walk and walk and go without water and food, and they will just keep going and give you no inkling that they're about to collapse, and then it just happens. They will fall down and die. And I'm watching that video, and I was like, thank God I fell down this little rabbit hole and ended up on a video about camels, because the truth is, most of us tend to be the same way. You can't tell from the outside that you're about to break down, right? But you know, you feel it inside, but on the outside, you just look strong and you just keep going, and people are like, look at how strong they are. They can make it through anything, until you just fall over dead one day, right? Maybe not physically, but emotionally, relationally, spiritually. humans have an incredible capacity to rally in the face of hardship and difficulty. We rally and we rally and we rally, but then one day we have nothing left. And our soul simply says, I'm done. I quit. I don't want to do this anymore. Has that ever happened to you? Because it's happened to me. So there's this incredible observation in Proverbs chapter 24, verse 16. It says this, for though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again, but the wicked stumble when calamity strikes. I don't know about you, but when I read that verse, I tend to focus on the they rise again part. That feels like it's really important. But the they fall 7 times part seems kind of important too, right? Because it's not just once or twice, it's 7 times, which seems like a lot. Only it's worse than that because, well, in the scriptures, the number 7 is used a couple of different ways. It's used as a number of completion or perfection, but it's also used to communicate sort of an indefinite number of times. In fact, there's this really famous moment between Jesus and the disciples regarding forgiveness. And Peter, one of the disciples, was trying to show off and impress Jesus, and he came to Jesus and he said, Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother? Up to 7 times? I mean, he's just thinking like, man, that seems like a lot. And Jesus is like, no, not 7. How about 70 times 7? Right? It's this indefinite number of times. And so when the scriptures say, right, though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again, right? What he's saying is that you fall and 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 you fall. But if you're righteous, my question is when I read that, why should you fall at all, right? I mean, isn't the fact that you fell proof that you're not righteous? But the assumption here is that the righteous are actually gonna fall. And not just here and there, looks like all the time. See, I think if you're a church person, I think part of why we struggle with being resilient when life really sucks is that we thought if we were aligned with Jesus, we'd never fall down. But God is expecting you to fall. He's expecting you to fail, to lose, to mess up, to get hurt, to be discouraged. The difference between those who are resilient and those who aren't isn't whether you fall down or fail or get knocked down by life. It's that you get up one more time than you fell. The difference isn't exponential. It's not a factor of 5 or 10. It's simply the difference of 1. Because it doesn't matter how many times you fall down. You just have to get up that one more time. See, I think when we're in those moments, we have a tendency to think that what we're lacking is inspiration. What we're lacking is motivation. What we're lacking is just being determined enough. But most of us are drowning in oceans of inspiration for things that we haven't done yet. And for things that we're quite honestly not sure we'll ever do. Have you ever known somebody who was getting ready to do all kinds of stuff like their whole life? They're getting ready to do this and they're getting ready to train for that and they're getting ready to lose weight and they're getting ready and it just never happens. See, the problem isn't really an inspiration problem. See, I've had this ridiculous pattern in my life that goes something like this. I recognize that I need to change or do something. So I cook up a giant, really unrealistic plan. I psych myself up with lots of inspiration. I come out of the gate crazy hot like a madman. Let's do this. I'm going to do this. Yeah. I see little to no immediate results or progress. Realize that I overestimated, overextended, and overexerted myself. Get overwhelmed and get discouraged, and then give up. And then I wait for a little while until the sting and the memory of that whole experience sort of fades a little bit, and then I start it all over again. You can stop laughing. My wife is literally laughing because she knows this is true. If I had $1 for every time I've walked in and been like, that's it, I am sick of this about me, I'm going to change this, we would be rich. We would be rich. Because she just starts laughing. She goes, no, you're not. You're not going to change that. You're just going to do that. See, because I've done that pattern with my weight and my relationships and my habits and my faith. That kind of pattern obviously doesn't work. But if inspiration isn't what most of us are missing, what is? How do we become more resilient? Well, to begin answering that, I want to take you to a story in the Old Testament about a guy named Gideon. It's found in the book of Judges, chapter 6. If you have a Bible or you have a Bible app and you want to follow along, you can open it there. If not, all the scriptures we're going to read today will be on the screen for you. So Judges chapter 6, beginning with verse 2, it says this. It says, the Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. If you are unfamiliar at all with the Bible, the Israelites were God's people. The Midianites were not their friends. Verse 3, whenever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders from Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east would attack Israel, camping in the land and destroying crops as far away as Gaza. And they left the Israelites with nothing to eat. They took all the sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys. These enemy hordes, coming with their livestock and tents, were as thick as locusts. They arrived in droves on camels, too numerous to count. They stayed until the land was stripped bare, so that Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. So that just kind of gives you the context of the story that we're about to get into. Things are really, really, really bad. We've all been through some really rough times. We've been through some rough times in this country. Most of us have never been through something like this. I also think it's crazy how long they waited before they cried out to God. Right? And we'll do the same thing. We'll struggle and we'll grind and we'll fight. And it's only when we're out of options do we then go, I guess I'll ask God for help. I guess I'll pray. I guess, God, have you been paying attention? I'm down here struggling. Why don't you help me out? And so the Israelites finally cry out to God. And this is what happens in verse 11 of that same chapter. It says, then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah and said, you get a car and you get a car. You get a car. And Gideon was threshing wheat at the bottom of the winepress to hide from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, mighty warrior, the Lord is with you. Sir, Gideon replied, first of all, if an angel comes and talks to you, don't treat him like he's your 10th grade teacher, like history teacher. Sir, Gideon replied, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say that the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites. See, I think Gideon had one of the same challenges that we have in our faith. And that is that many of us turn to God to avoid the kind of circumstances that would actually require resilience. Right? We think that if we believe in God, we can avoid a more difficult, harsh, a more challenging life. I mean, after all, that's what giving your life to Jesus is all about, right? Avoiding problems and pain and disappointment. I mean, doesn't it feel like one of the frustrating things about being a Christian and believing in God is that you have the same problems that everybody else has? I mean, it feels like a ripoff. Like, God, I thought you were going to give me a better life. But in fact, in the book of John, Jesus actually tells us that we should count on having trouble and difficulties in this world. He says, in this world, in this life, you're gonna have all kinds of problems, but take heart. I'm with you. I've overcome the world. See, God's promise isn't that when he's with us, everything will be great. His promise is that he's with us even when things aren't great. And that is a powerful and beautiful and comforting reality. But it's actually deeper than that. I want to take you back up just a little bit in the story. I want you to look at these verses that happen a couple of chapters before Gideon's story begins. It's in Judges chapter 3. So this is 3 chapters before where we picked it up. It says this. Verse 1, these are the nations that the Lord left in the land to test those Israelites who had not experienced the wars of Canaan. He did this, meaning God did this, to teach warfare to generations of Israelites who had no experience in battle. And then it gives a big old giant list of all of the nations, all of the people that were fighting against Israel that God left in the land so that they would have to fight it out with them. So here's what it's telling us, right? Let me just translate it a little bit. It's telling us that some, not all, but some, a huge portion of the very things that Gideon was whining about, some, not all, of the very struggles that he didn't want to face, some, not all, of the really dark and painful and challenging situations that he took to be proof that God had abandoned them, that God had actually orchestrated to teach them how to fight and be strong so that they could face down any enemy, any obstacle, or any challenge. So that they could actually discover how much they were capable of, so that they could actually learn how to trust and depend on him, so they could see what he could do in their lives. Which is an incredible reality when you think about it. I mean, that's uncomfortable. That God leaves difficulty and challenges and struggles in your life, that he won't solve them all. And the reason that he does that is because he wants to teach you how to be strong. That there's battles that he won't fight for you, that he comes alongside you and he's with you as you're struggling through it, but that he wants you to learn how to fight and get stronger and be more resilient. Now here's the thing, he's not a masochist, right? He's not playing some game with your life. He didn't intend the world to be filled with pain. We actually are the ones that did that. He certainly doesn't enjoy our pain and suffering, but he is a realist. He knows that there is pain in this life. I just told you where Jesus said that. And so God doesn't give us a way around it. He actually takes us through it. And not only does he promise to be with us through it, he actually uses those dark and painful experiences to build the internal framework and structure in our life that takes courage and strength and resilience to grow inside. See, the truth is, everything worthwhile in life, everything you want to achieve, everything you want to receive is uphill from where you are right now. Man, I'm just so mad at that. Because the problem I have, and maybe you have this problem, is that I have lots of uphill dreams and desires, but my habits are mostly downhill habits. It's amazing how far I can run when I'm running downhill. It's amazing how fast I can be when I'm running downhill. You put me on an uphill, see, we want the outcomes, right? But we don't want the process that's required to achieve the outcomes that we want. So the angel of the Lord appears to Gideon, who's hiding out in a wine press, and he says, "Hey, you mighty warrior, the Lord is with you." Which is, I feel like the narrator's like letting us in on a really funny joke, because he's literally hiding. He's afraid. And God shows up and he's like, "You are just the warrior I've been looking for." And he's like looking around. Dude, I'm just trying to eat. I'm trying to get enough food right now just to eat today. And the people cried out to God, and God responds by sending an angel to appear to and prepare Gideon so that Gideon can be sent to help. See, here's the deal. There are seasons where all you can do is just make it through the day. There's no doubt about that. And that is definitely part of this conversation about resilience. And in fact, it may even be where it begins, right? But God just doesn't want to help you make it through the day. He actually wants to do something extraordinary in and through your life. What we'll see all month long in the story of Gideon is that your resilience isn't just for you. Your courage to come out of the wine press and stop hiding and get back in the fight isn't just about you. You growing, you creating, you tackling the problems of this life and of the world around you, it's bigger than you. Over and over and over again in the scriptures, what you see is that God answers desperate people's prayers by sending them somebody. He answers them with a person. The people were enslaved in Egypt, and Moses is way out in the desert somewhere, and he sees a bush and he approaches it, and God begins to talk to him. And one of the things God says is, "I've heard the cry of my people. They've been enslaved and oppressed, and so I've come down to rescue them. So now I'm sending you. You're the answer to the prayer, Moses. And he appears to Gideon, and Gideon doesn't know it, but Gideon's about to be the answer to a whole nation's cry for God's help. We can never become who we were created to be, who we long to be, who God imagines us to be, without resilience. And not just resilience to overcome the hard things that come our way, but the resilience to take on the challenges that are facing the world around us on behalf of other people. So this is how Gideon responds. Verse 14, it says, "Then the Lord turned to him and said, 'Go with the strength you have.'" By the way, this moment happens right after Gideon was like, "Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. God's not with us. He's abandoned us. He's abandoned us. If he was with us, why did all this bad stuff happen?" The angel of the Lord doesn't even answer that question. He just blows right past it. He just says, "Go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites." Oh, that's all? That's all you want me to do? He's like, "I'm sending you." "But Lord," Gideon replied. Now at least he's moved from sir to Lord, right? First he was like, he says, "How can I be the one? I think you got the wrong guy. My clan is the weakest in the tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family. Nobody listens to me. I'm the youngest one. I get stuck at the kids' table at Thanksgiving. Nobody even talks to me. Nobody's going to listen to me. I'm not the guy." And the Lord said to him, "I will be with you." So Gideon does what all of us do when God sort of drops this really big challenge in our laps. Wrong number, all right? Yep, sorry. I don't know. Yep, no, wrong place. Do you know who I am? You do realize that Israel has actual warriors, right, that you could appear to? That if you would have said, "Hey, you're a mighty warrior," they'd have been like, "Yeah, that's right. You found the right guy." And he's like, "You don't get to pretend that I'm one of them, because I know I'm not one of them." So it kind of feels like you're sort of setting me up to like try to get me to do something that I'm probably not going to want to do. But God just says to him what he says to us. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. Go with what you already have. Go in the strength that you already have. Go with what you already know. Go, just start. Get started. It's time to move. And this is incredibly telling. See, because resilience isn't about inspiration or determination. The angel didn't have this whole conversation pumping him up. "Dude, you're the king, man, you're the warrior, you're the big bad warrior, let's go." He just comes out storming out. No, there was no inspiration. It was just like, here's what's gonna happen. You gotta do this, you gotta move, you gotta take action. Resilience isn't about inspiration. It's the result of finding purpose and channeling our passion into regular habits and practices. It just looks like discipline, which is the worst news ever. Because I'm way more about inspiration. See, it's not about what you're inspired to do, though. It's about what you actually do. And so God says to them, "Go with the strength that you already have. I will be with you." Start small. Take the next step. Take the step that's right in front of you. You don't got to go fight them by yourself right now. I got a plan. Right? And this conversation is the opposite of the whole, like, I'm going to hatch a giant plan and get all psyched up and inspired up and come out hot and then, fizzle right out. It's the opposite of that thing that I normally do. See, for my personality, if it's flashy and fun and exciting and immediate, I'm there, I'm down, I'm in. Let's do it. But if it's not those things, my initial sort of emotional response is like, "That's probably not worth my time. Seems like hard work." If I can't do, the way I'm naturally wired, if I can't do the big thing, I just don't want to do nothing. I think that little thing, are you kidding me? Give me something big to do. If I don't know what to do, I'm probably not going to do anything. But he's like, just go, move, act. It's time to move. And actually, if you were to keep reading the story of what happens, Gideon, where he begins, he goes and makes a really small sacrifice, literally. He made a meal and he offered it to God because that's all he could think to do. He didn't know what to do. So he just made a sacrifice. And then God blows his mind a little bit with what he's able to do with the sacrifice that Gideon makes. And once that happens, then Gideon's like, oh, okay, this is starting to get serious. So then he builds an altar. And the altar was just something that they did to remind them like, oh yeah, this was a really big, really important moment. And so every time I come by this place, I'm going to think, oh, that is the place where the angel of God appeared to me. That is the place where I made that sacrifice. That is the place where God blew my mind. Because I know I'll walk away here and it'll get hard and I'll just sort of forget, and the intensity of this moment and the reality of this moment will sort of just fade away and I'll just kind of disappear, and the next thing you know, I'll be hiding out in the wine press again. And I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to build this altar right here so I'm reminded of the power of what God is trying to do in my life, of the assignment that he's given me to take on. See, our tendency is to believe that what matters most is the giant leaps that we take. And there are times in life and there are times in faith where that is necessary. There are definitely some giant leaps that God will lead you to take. In fact, if you're a person of faith and you've never felt like God has asked you to take a giant leap, you're doing it wrong, because God will always lead you to a life that's bigger than you. But resilience is a product of small, consistent steps, way more than it is of those giant occasional leaps that we take. See, Gideon took that first step. It was just a small step. He made that sacrifice. And then God gave him a slightly bigger step. And it wasn't huge, but the next step was something that he couldn't pull off alone. It involved him doing some things in his home and in his hometown that he was going to need some help doing, which was pulling down some of the statues and altars that were built to other gods. Because God's like, hey, if we're going to rally people around this, I need them to be focused. I need you to get rid of all this other stuff. I need them to know who I am. And so that's what Gideon does. He goes and gets some help. But when he goes to do the thing that God told him to do, he kind of chickens out and he's afraid of what might happen, of how people will respond. And so instead of doing it and just getting to it, he decides he's going to do it at night so nobody would know it was him. And when I read that, I was like, you are my people, Gideon. Because I was like, that sounds like something I do, right? Because even when I'm courageous, I'm kind of a coward. Even when I have faith, I still sort of fumble are you sure? Like I still kind of fumble my way forward. See, I think some of us are just born with some like more natural resilience and courage than others. But the good news is that anyone can become more resilient because it's just a muscle that can be developed in your life over time. Because it comes from character and choices, not personalities and pedigrees. And so Gideon just keeps taking the next step forward. He falls down and he keeps getting back up. And little by little, his resilience is starting to build. So there's this verse in the New Testament that the stepbrother of Jesus, or half-brother of Jesus, James, he wrote these words in James chapter 1. He says this, "Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Now, if you've been in church for any length of time, you probably know this verse. You've probably quoted this verse. Lots of people quote this verse. I've said this verse many times. But can I just be honest? I think this verse, on the surface, sounds absurd. Consider it joy when you go through trials. And not just any old joy, pure joy. Okay, James, put down the bottle, step back, right? And I think it's easy for us to just kind of get hung up there. But that's why you should never just read a verse, because he doesn't stop. He tells us that the only way it's possible to consider it joy is if we know something. And I love that he says, because you know. Did you know? Did I know? Seems like kind of a big assumption there, James. Because you know, right? He just says it like, everybody knows this. Because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And I'm like, wait, what? Don't just go off to the perseverance. Why do you want to test my faith, God? See, that there's a direct relationship between perseverance and resilience. between the capacity to keep moving forward no matter how hard our life is, and our ability to get up one more time. And James says that a big part of the way that you get more of that is to have your faith tested. See, if you're a follower of Jesus, if you're a Christian, you're a person of faith, I think a lot of us, we really want big faith, but we don't want any problems that would actually require us to have big faith. But what's the point of having faith if you have no problems? You actually don't need faith if you have no problems. If you've ever prayed the prayer, God, give me bigger faith, in heaven that gets translated as, God, give me bigger problems. And so maybe you're like, maybe little faith will do, God, because I really don't want the problems. It's also a little bit disturbing to think that God wants to test my faith, right? Like is he setting us up to fail? But that's the thing, that God doesn't want you to fail the test. Not only is he not setting you up to fail, he leverages everything in your favor to help you succeed. We actually see that in the story of Gideon, that God leads him very carefully and very, patiently, step by step through a process. And like us, as I said a second ago, Gideon was all over the place. It was one step forward, two steps back. But God was endlessly loving and patient and kind with him. And so Gideon's resilience continues to grow until eventually, as we're going to see as we go through the rest of this story, all through this month, he's leading an army to free the people of God. I wonder, what small sacrifice is God asking you to make this morning? I know, how offensive to think that God would ask you to sacrifice anything. But I wonder what small sacrifice he's asking you to make. Not because he needs it. See, Gideon made his sacrifice thinking he was making it for God. But part of what blew his mind is God just consumed it with fire. He didn't need the food. The sacrifice was more for Gideon than it was for God. I wonder what small step that you need to take. I wonder what action that you need to begin regularly repeating in your life to strengthen an area of weakness. You don't got to get all inspired up and come up with this plan, start buying all the workout gear and getting all the things set and then not do it. No, you just start where you are. Use what you have. Go in the strength that you already have. Go in what you already know and do what you can. See, I'm not here, honestly, I hope you hear this. There's nothing about my story that would cause me to stand here because I haven't fallen or failed or gotten lost or knocked down by life. I'm only here because I'm just stubborn enough to keep getting up one more time than what I fell down. Who told you that it wasn't supposed to be hard? It wasn't God. Who convinced you that God had abandoned you? It wasn't God. And so if you've fallen, get up. So what if you failed? You might be going through hell this morning. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't choose the easy path in your life. Don't choose to hide. Don't choose to shrink back or settle for just getting by. Get up and move forward. You can't become by going backwards. You can only become who God created you to be by moving forward and facing what's ahead. You will always have the opportunity to choose a lesser life, to be a lesser person, to have lesser faith. You will always have the opportunity to choose what's easy and comfortable, to be the lesser version of you. But that is not who God's called you to be. That is not who Jesus invites you to be. That is not who Jesus died for you to be. He wants to come alongside you and walk with you through it so that you can actually become who he created you to be. Years ago, I was going through a really hard time, and I probably should have looked up who said this and given them credit, but I don't know. I don't know who said it, but somebody sent me this note, and they didn't say anything else. They just sent me this quote. It said, "The purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things. I love that. I've been defeated by some really small things in my life. How about you? But when we begin to grow in resilience, it takes greater things, something greater and greater and greater to actually defeat us. And God is wanting to strengthen you to the point where it would just take an earth-shattering, earth-moving thing to actually defeat you. And really to get you to the point where it doesn't matter what life throws at you. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world, that you could not be defeated. Choose a life that demands faith and courage and strength and resilience. Choose the hard path, not because it's hard, but because that's the only way to make a difference with your life. Choose the uphill, because when you make it up that first hill, it's worth it. Somewhere, someone is crying out to God, and maybe, just maybe, you are the answer to their prayer. That's what's at stake. Let's pray together. God, I don't know why I'm so emotional. I think because this conversation is such a huge part of my story. I think because, Lord, I've spent my whole life feeling and believing that I was really resilient, and there was plenty of evidence to that fact. But then I've had things just beat me to the ground. I've gotten stuck. I surrendered and sat down. I gave up until you came along, until you sent some people into my life to say, you're not done. You got to get up. What I couldn't see and what I didn't know then was, God, you weren't just trying to help me make it through the horrible things that had happened in my life. You were trying to set me up to do something bigger than myself for people around me. And it's not because I'm special, because I am not. It's not because I'm talented, because I am not. It's because I just keep getting up. And my prayer this morning is for every person who has a relationship, who has an area of their life, an emotional place where they've just sat down. They've fallen. Life has knocked them down. Somebody put them down. And they were hurt. And they just collapsed there. And there's part of them that's still stuck in that moment. They just haven't been able to move forward. I pray, God, that you would meet them in that place. Because that's where Gideon was, just surviving, just hiding out, just trying to make it through the day, just trying to find enough food to survive. And yet you had something so much bigger, something that he could not even imagine. And so, Lord, I pray for those, God, who have not fallen, they've not broken down, they've not collapsed, but they're feeling the weight of that. On the outside, everything looks good. On the outside, everybody, they look strong to everyone, but they feel like they know they're on the verge of just collapsing and it being done. And pray, God, that they would know that you see them, that their options aren't to just keep going as things are or collapse and stay put. But Lord, that you can come alongside them and begin to strengthen and heal and help them if they would only cry out to you. That you have people that you want to send around them to answer the cry of their hearts. And so, Lord, in the beauty of this moment, would you speak to us? We don't always do this, but I wanted to take time today. I asked the band to come back, and they're going to sing a song that we sang earlier. And I just want to give a moment for you to be able to respond to God if he's speaking to you. And then I'm going to come and pray and dismiss, but the band's going to sing. Just allow God to talk to you in the moment. God, we want the life you have for us. We don't want to settle. Would you speak to us about the sacrifices, the choices, the decisions, the directions that you are inviting us, calling us to make? All of us can step into and begin to climb that hill towards who you created us to be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that He's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the 3rd way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that He can bless and anoint your finances and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you and thank you for watching our online service today.